Good evening, and welcome to the May 3rd, 2022 Gildan Central School District Board of Education meeting. Would you all please silence your cell phones and stand for the pledge? Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first on the agenda, we have public comment, and we have one public comment. This is Elizabeth Floyd.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Floyd Mayer. I have a daughter in Farnsworth Middle School, and I'm a member of the Board of Education's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. My comment is about the upcoming school board election on May 17th. First, I would like to thank our district's teachers, administrators, and staff for the work they have done over the past several years through the unprecedented challenges of a pandemic. To our teachers, many of us here in Guilderland trust you with the care of our children and appreciate your efforts to help shape them into well-educated, responsible, and compassionate adults. We believe that the materials you select and your teaching methods are well considered and age appropriate and meant to help make all students feel welcome, included, and inspired to learn. We believe that you know more about teaching than we do. When I attended Guilderland schools decades ago, the composition of the student body looked very different. Now, according to figures from the New York State Department of Education, the 4,800 students in our district are 73% Caucasian and 27% from other ethnic and racial backgrounds, with the largest group, 12%, being Asians. Black students, Hispanic or Latino students, and multiracial students each account for 4% of the total population. 5% of our students are English language learners, and 12% have some form of disability. A full 21% are economically disadvantaged. We also know that we have many students who do not identify as cisgender or as straight. Guilderland is becoming a richly diverse world, and the district is trying to respond to those changes. The district has created a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of the Board of Education, with members including parents, students, faculty, and people from the community, to study and listen and try to gauge what kind of changes need to be made. The committee tries to address needs of all students, including those with different ethnic or racial backgrounds, different abilities, different gender or sexual identities, and different economic statuses. The district has hired a full-time DEI coordinator who has been very busy listening to students and educators and creating or helping with initiatives throughout the district to benefit all of our students. The New York State's regents issued a call to action on DEI a year ago that urges educators in New York State's public schools to avoid the dangers inherent in telling a story from only one perspective. Part of it reads, "We must tell the stories of all those who have contributed to the development of this country and all those who continue to make it the diverse and beautiful tapestry it is today." One slate of candidates in the upcoming elections wants to increase and not decrease the voices heard by Guilderland students. Please join me in voting on May 17th for the United for Public Schools slate. Kelly Person, Gloria Tollhilt, Kim Blasiak, and Katie DiPiero. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Floyd Mayer. Linda, are there any more public comments? No, okay, thank you. So next on the agenda, we have our budget hearing, and I'll turn it over to Neil.
Good evening. An annual requirement of the budget process each year is to share with the board and with the community what's called a budget hearing, and this will be a recap of the budget that's being proposed for May 17th. So in sum, our budget for next year is $109,887,845. That's a $4,908,275 increase over the prior year. In terms of a percentage, that's a 4.68% increase. In terms of our estimated tax levy increase and tax rate increase, those are both estimated to increase by 2.98%. And again, the way this budget is structured, we would need a 50% voter approval for passage of the budget. So we don't need a supermajority 60% vote for this particular budget. Part of the requirements of a budget hearing is some formatting that we need to do to present information in accordance with state requirements, and one of those is a 3-part budget summary. So as you can see from the pie chart, the majority of our expenses, as you might imagine, goes toward our programs. 77.1% of all of our expenses go toward providing educational programs to students. A lesser number or amount is for capital expenditures, and then beyond, a little bit less than that, is our administrative expenditures. So again, vast amount of our expenses are tied to our educational programming, working with students each and every day. In terms of the 3 components, we have some additional detailed breakdown. So comparing the current year budget, 2021-22 to 2022-23, you can see the increases there, 81 million to 84 million. Percentage of the total in terms of those component shares, last year's budget, or current year budget, 77.3%. Next year it'll be 77.1%. And you can see some of the types of expenditures that we're talking about here. So salaries and benefits, all of our teaching staff, but it also includes our support staff, guidance counselors, aides and monitors, nurses, social workers, psychologists, speech therapists, all of those services are included in this component, as well as professional development, all of our library, media, and computer services, student transportation, co-curricular activities, and interscholastic athletics. In terms of the administrative component of the budget, you can see it's increasing from 11.8 to 12.5 million, or 11.3% of the overall budget to 11.4%. Here we're looking at salaries and benefits of administrative supervisors and administrative clerical staff, our public information and central printing, research planning and evaluation, central data processing, tax collection and most of our legal services, and school board cost. So those are the components of that particular segment. And then finally, we have the capital component. Again, we're looking at going from just about 12 million to 12.6 million, or 11.4% to 11.5%. This is all of our debt payments on our buildings, construction projects related, school bus purchases, tax certiorari and court-ordered costs, as well as operations and maintenance, and that includes all of the salaries and benefits of custodial and maintenance staff. In terms of the revenue budget, total for the current year is just about 105 million. It's going to go to 109 million. Next year, almost 110 million. You can see that state aid had the biggest increase in terms of the overall categories, a little loss in terms of local revenues. Appropriated fund balance was 0, and the current year is going to be about 270,000, and our payment in lieu of taxes remains the same, and an increase in our overall tax levy, as was mentioned before. Just to see that in terms of a graph, on the left is the revenues. So property taxes comprise the majority of the district's revenues at 71.2%. State aid is 27.1% of our overall revenues, and local sources comprise 1.7%. In terms of our expenditures, not surprisingly, salaries and benefits are our largest category at 78.6%. Again, we're a people-driven industry, so we're working with kids. We need adults and individuals to teach them and to support them, and that's the largest portion of our overall budget. In addition to that, we have contractual services at 7.2%, BOCES at 6.7%, our debt payments comprise 5.1%, equipment and supplies are 2.1%, and interfund transfers are 0.3%. In terms of the overall tax impact, we have an estimated tax levy increase of 2.265 million. That's an increase of 2.98%, and again, the estimated tax rate increase is 2.98% as well. And we won't know what those actual tax rate increases are by town until we get a final assessment data over the summer. And then we need to talk a little bit about the tax levy limit or property tax cap. As a reminder, it's an 8-step formula. It's determined by New York State. It limits the vast majority of expenses to an increase of 2% or less. And the results of the formula determine the amount that the property taxes can increase, and that sets a threshold for voter approval. And that's really the crux of what this formula does. A threshold establishes a threshold for voter approval. So if the tax increase is proposed as less than the threshold amount, the budget passes. You have to have more than 50%, so it's often shown as 50% plus one. We need at least one more vote than 50% of the voters voting yes to have a pass budget. But if the tax increase that's proposed is greater than the threshold amount, and that's not the case for us, the budget would need more than 60% of the voters voting yes to have a passed budget. So we're in the category of the 50% plus one passage rate. And again, if the budget's defeated, there's no increases in taxes permitted. So you kind of have to unwind all of the increases and go back to what we have in the current year in terms of the overall tax levy. In terms of the actual calculation, this is how it's laid out by the state of New York, and this is what we must follow. So it starts with the prior year tax levy. What is applied then is what's called a tax-based growth factor, and that's looked at as bricks and mortar within the town. So it's new construction, it's not just increases in values of homes. So the state actually comes up with that factor and provides it to us. That gets us our subtotal for the prior year tax levy. And then we have payment in lieu of taxes. We add that for the prior year, in this case $45,353. Then we subtract what are called capital expenditures net of state aid. So this is related to our borrowing. We have debt expenses. We have offsetting state aid, so you take the net of those, and that total is the $1.223 million shown. That gets us to our adjusted prior year tax levy of $75.3 million. Then we get to apply our allowable levy growth factor. And again, inflation's running about 4.7%. By the state of New York, we have a maximum of 2% or less. So if the actual CPI is less than 2%, that number would be less than 2%. It can never be more than 2%, regardless of where inflation is. That leads to our growth adjusted tax levy subtotal of $76.8 million. Then we subtract out our following year pilots, which is the same amount as shown above. That gets us to what's called our true tax levy limit, $76.7 million. We get to add back again now our capital expenditures net of state aid for the subsequent year, $1.6 million. Gets us to our maximum allowable tax levy amount of $78.4 million, or 3.2%. So it's a complicated formula, but it's the same one all schools have to use. We all have the same set of rules to follow, and in this case, it's 3.2% for the subsequent school year. This is another view of the same information, but maybe a little easier to follow in terms of recognizing the difference between our tax levy limit and our proposed tax levy. So as you can see on the left-hand side, our tax levy is $78.4 million. Our proposed levy is $78.2 million. The difference there is we're under our tax levy limit by about $167,000. In terms of the overall increase, we're going from 2.4 down to 2.2. Again, that's a difference of that 166,858. The percentage increase is noted before. Under the tax levy limit, we could go up to 3.2%. Our proposal is 2.98% for next year. And again, the note at the bottom, because we are below the maximum allowable tax levy limit, so the simple majority of 50% of the voters to have a passed budget. We always like to show what's the history in terms of the budget vote approval, looking at the last 6 years, what the levy increase was and what the tax levy limit was, and then our rate of passage. So as you can see, going from the bottom up, 2016-17, we're having budgets pass with a 70% margin, over 70% margin. More recently, we've been in the mid-60s, so 65, 66, 67. Voter, we had that 2021 when we had absentee ballot, we had a lot of voters, so that's an anomaly there in terms of the number of voters, but that was our highest turnout in recent times. And you can see the tax levy limit increases for those particular years as well. So we need to talk a little bit about what's a contingency budget and within the context of the tax levy limit law. So if the budget fails to pass on our first attempt, the board has a couple of options. It can choose to either put the same budget up or some modified version up for a second vote, or they could choose to go directly to a contingency budget. However, if the budget's defeated a second time, the board has no other options at that point. They must adopt a contingency budget. And under a contingency budget, there are some strings attached to that. So anything that's deemed to be a non-contingent expense, and these are things like new equipment, community use of buildings, they must be removed from the budget. And there's also an administrative budget cap component. So as we look at various parts of the budget, there's an administrative portion, and you have to look at that and determine whether the percentage of that is higher or not in the new budget than the defeated budget. If it is, you have to remove expenses to get it down to match what it was in the previous budget. So there could be some additional reductions beyond just getting it back to the tax levy limit from the previous, or tax levy from the previous year. Again, the big one is the property tax levy may not increase by any amount, which is 0% over the current year tax levy. So whatever we have in 2021-22 in terms of a tax levy, that's the same amount that we would have for 2022-23 if we're under a contingent budget. It's a significant difference, 2.2 million that we would have to find a way to get back to and remove 2.2 million. So it's a rolling of the dice in terms of a contingent budget. If the board has one opportunity, if the budget gets defeated, to have a choice, and then after that there is no choice if the budget's defeated a second time, and we would have to go to a contingent budget. In terms of the overall budget vote, propositions, and board elections, so for next year, a budget proposition, $109,887,845. We do, as we typically do, have a bus and vehicle equipment proposition, $976,000, and that's for the purchase of 8 new school buses. We do have an annual rotation. So each year, we've been buying a few buses, and when we take a few buses out of our fleet, it maintains an overall good fleet average. So we have a mix of older and newer buses, older and newer technology. We can manage our parts better. We can manage our service better. So that's been an effective way to kind of always have some new technology, doesn't overwhelm our staff. We can get the benefits of that and still have a fleet with a good average age. Again, what's hard to imagine is, like any transportation system, people expect you to be there day in and day out on time. Whether you take a bus, a taxi, whatever you do, you know what time it's supposed to be there and you want it to work. And we have the same expectations from our parents. So we try to make sure we maintain our fleet in a good condition, and purchasing buses every year and cycling through has proven very beneficial to allowing us to meet those requirements. We have 10 candidates vying for 4 open seats, and you can see the names listed. They're in order from left to right, top row, middle row, bottom row, in that order. So left to right, Katie DePiro's first on the ballot, followed by Nicole, followed by Kim, and so on in April. So that's the order they will appear on the ballot. And if you want any more information about our budget process, go to gildanschools.org, and we have a school budget news icon, and you can find all of this information there and more detailed information as well. Again, I'll just read the names, didn't read all of them. Candidates: Katie DePiro, Nicole Coonrod, Kimberly Blasiak, April McAllister, Mark Reamer, Jennifer Romano, Kelly Person, William Kearney, Gloria Toll-Hilt, and Barbara Frederico. And then we would encourage everyone to vote. So this is your one opportunity as a community member to have your voice heard. Please come out and vote. The vote date, Tuesday, is May 17th. The polls open at 7 in the morning. They run until 9 o'clock at night. You will vote at the elementary school in your attendance zone. And if you need more information about which attendance zone you live in, you can click on the link at the bottom of the slide, and that will provide you with the information so you can find out what school you would need to go to. You can also call our district office at any point to find that information out as well. And with that, that's the end of the presentation. Happy to take any questions anybody might have. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Neil. Next on the agenda, we have the consent items. This includes the minutes from the April 12th and April 27th board meetings, the CPSC and CSE recommendations, a personnel action. Can I have a motion to approve the consent items? Judy, second. Barb, any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 9-0. Next is information items, curriculum and instruction. Dr. Wiles?
Yes, I'll take these two congratulatory items. The first is a story about our GHS students who compete in a programming contest. So we want to offer our congratulations to Guilderland High School teacher Rachel Pasheri and the 21 students who competed in Siena College's computer programming contest before our April break. The yearly contest is held by the Siena CS department. Teams are given 7 different programming problems, increasing in difficulty, in 3.5 hours to solve and submit their solutions. The teams earn their scores based on the sum of their completed problem times. There are 2 levels within the competition: green, which is beginner to intermediate, and gold, intermediate to advanced. These also happen to be Siena's colors. This year, 23 schools were represented in the competition, with 87 teams participating for a total of 311 students. Guilderland was able to make 6 teams this year with 21 students, 4 gold and 2 green. Of the 87 teams this year, we finished as follows. In second place, Guilderland A, Abi Nadella, Ian Chen, Michael Chen, and Joel Matthew, completing 7 out of 7 problems. Finishing 8th was Guilderland E with Ram Bagat, Tianli Q, Ansh Gart, and Michael Wong, completing 6 out of 7 problems. Finishing 11th was Guilderland C, Grace Way, and Clark Mattoon, completing 6 of 7 problems. Finishing 52nd was Guilderland D. That was Enzo McLaughlin, Jake Pizzulo, Dylan O'Brien, and Christian Edict, and they completed 3 out of 7. Finishing 57th was Guilderland B. Aaron Venkat, Colleen Grimshaw, Zuan Wu, and Abad Rahman, completing 3 out of 7. And 67th was Guilderland F. Jason Yamashita, Akash Mishra, and Siva Bellamarugan, completing 2 out of 7. So that sounds like a very stressful competition, but with terrific results. So congratulations to our teacher, Rachel Pasheri, and her amazing team. And next, we have some students to recognize for their competition in the New York State TESOL logo contest. So we're offering our congratulations to Saba Nasser, a 6th grade student at Farnsworth Middle School. Saba won the New York State Teacher of English to Speakers of Other Languages, that's TESOL, student logo contest. The contest invited New York State multilingual students in grades K through 12 to create a logo design based on this year's theme of shifting teaching paradigms, examining inclusive dynamic practices. Saba will receive a cash prize of $150, and the winning logo will be featured on all promotional materials for the conference, which will take place in November. Of the 8 finalists chosen from across New York State, 5 are Guilderland Central School District students. In addition to Saba, the following students were chosen as finalists: Rekha Nasser, Susanna Cherian, Koa Lee, and Iris Chan. So congratulations to those very talented students, and you can see their logos are linked in your materials.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wells. Superintendent information?
All right, I'm going to go to the podium for the long-awaited school start time update. Oh, and thank you, Mr. Sanders, for getting that up there. So I want to start this evening by thanking the longest-serving task force in the, I think, history of the Guilderland Central School District. We created our school times, start time task force back in the fall of 2018, and here we are in the spring of 2022, still working really hard to figure this out and get it right. So there's about 35 people on this committee who we started meeting in person 4 years ago. And then after the challenges that we experienced this year, we brought that task force back together. We met virtually several times this spring in order to solve the dilemma of when is the best time to start all of our school levels. So tonight I'm sharing the work of our task force. So I want to say that these draft options, they all come with pros and cons. There is not a model up here that is perfect. So what we are charging the board with is really weighing imperfections. But we wanted to do the following, wanted to create options that we are confident can be done through our transportation department, given our geography, where our buildings are located, spread across our close to 60 square miles, the traffic patterns that we know to exist on 146 and 155, and of course Western Ave, and then the number of drivers that we actually have to drive these buses. And that variable is probably one of the most challenging, because if we could add more routes, we would have a lot more flexibility, but we can't count on that. So as I said, every one of these options has trade-offs. And there might be additional pros and cons that others think about in addition to the ones I share tonight. I tried to capture the big ones. And then all of the options require more work to refine and define the student and teacher schedules, and we might have some contractual considerations to make. But the one thing we can't tinker with today are the minutes of the runs. That's really the thing we can't say. What if we took a minute here or a minute there? You have to believe me that we have been through dozens of options looking at a minute here or a minute there. And what we don't want to do is make an option look more attractive because we adjust the minutes and then find out that we can't get our buses to school on time, and our students will pay the consequences for that. That's the challenge we lived through this year. We're continuing to live through it, and we want it to feel different and be different next year. So I'm going to start with a reminder of the current year and what we're doing right now, because this, it gets complicated quick. So on paper, and you see lots of asterisks in this presentation, on paper, this is what we have said we would do, that the drop time at our elementary buildings would be at 7:30 and classes would start at 7:45. That the end of the day would be at 1:40 and the buses would roll at 1:50, and that the late buses would work 2:45 each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for a 5-hour and 55-minute day. Other than horrific traffic at some of our buildings, the elementary plan actually worked, probably because they're first. Things went more south after that. On paper, we said our high school drop time would be 8:10 and classes would start at 8:20. We planned for an end time at 2:57 and with the buses rolling at 3:05 and a late bus on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 3:45. The high school buses were never able, all of them, to arrive on time. So the de facto start time of the day was 8:30. This wreaked havoc with homeroom and just made for a very disrupted start of the day for many of our students. But that's a 6-hour and 37-minute day. And then the middle school, again on paper, had an 8:55 drop time and a 9:02 start. A 3:31 end time and a 3:45 depart for buses, and a late bus at 4:20, and we were only able to do the late bus one day a week at Farnsworth, and that was on Wednesday. You'll remember that, well, in the middle school, we didn't make any of the times. But the end of the day was particularly difficult. We ended up having a tiered dismissal where walkers and students who were being picked up actually were dismissed at 3:31. We got that traffic through the various circles, which were redesigned several times, and then the buses arrived at 3:45. So we had to provide additional supervision for students who rode the bus. It was challenging, and I see Mr. Laster nodding his head back there. So this is what we wanted to fix over the course of our discussions here. But we also wanted to be mindful of what our original charge to the committee was. I mean, we spent a ton of time in the first year of the task force looking at the research about adolescent sleep habits and the need for adolescents to get more sleep, and recognizing when they actually get tired at night. It's not like some of us, which could be 8:30, but it's more like 10:30, 11:30, 12, and then they need to sleep later in the day. So we were driven by that research that has been all over the media. And we also wanted to know, well, what does this look like for our own students? So I have a handful of slides here that I'm going to give credit to Mike Piscatelli and Steve Wolf, who actually put these surveys together to gather data from our students and our parents. And I'm going to share them just so you have a little bit more reference of what our students told us back in 2018, and then again in 2022. So just a little bit of sense of the number of respondents we had back each time. In 2018, you can see the numbers of parents and students at all the levels who participated. And then again in 2022, generally pretty equal participation. Initially, by the way, for our GHS students this year, our initial response rate was pretty poor. So we actually redid the survey. I can't remember if we did it in a class or a homeroom, but we essentially encouraged every student to complete the data so we would have a good representation of what our students were feeling and experiencing. So the big question, what are the most common wake-up times? And you can see them. This is based on the parent survey when they tell us when their elementary children would get up, and for the vast majority of elementary, it's between 6 and 7. For the middle school, again, 64%. In 2018, it was between 6:30 and 7:30. This year, it's between 7 and 8 for middle school. And then at high school, 66% of students in 2018 said they got up between 5:30 and 6:30. And now it's 78% who say they get up between 6:30 and 7:30. So according to the students, what are the most common wake-up times? Middle school, 65% between 6:30 and 7:30, and a little more than half said between 7 and 8 this past year. At the high school, we still have 66% who get up between 5:30 and 6:30. This year, that's moved back an hour, 67%, and they're getting up between 6:30 and 7:30. Big question, how much sleep do you get each night on average? And I'll just let you peruse that a little bit. In a couple slides, we have some comparative information. Point out the note at the very bottom. Back in 2018, almost a third, between a quarter and a third of our high school students said they got between 5 and 6 hours of sleep.
Marie or
Yep.
Rebecca, what's the recommended hour for teenagers? Isn't it higher?
Eight to nine, I think, is the sweet spot.
Thank you.
So you can, if you look at the 8 to 9, that's a great question, Blanca. You can see kind of where our students line up there. So let me go down to 2022. If you want to go back to that 8 to 9 hour. And the note at the very bottom, a smaller percentage, about a fifth, 21% of our high school students are still saying they get 5 to 6 hours a night. But I believe, let me go to the next one here. So you can see the comparison. That makes it a little bit easier to, so we have fewer students getting 6 to 7 hours over time. You have more getting 7 to 8, a little bit more getting 8 to 9, and a tiny bit more and a tiny bit more are getting 9 to 10. And this is a total of about 240 students. And this is what students tell us. And then we asked, how has the later start time impacted your hours of sleep? This is the recent one. For our high school students, 35% said they get more sleep. 16% said they get less sleep. And about half said there was no change. And at the middle school, our middle schoolers, more than half said they're getting more sleep. 17 said less, and about 30% said no change. And then how has the late start time impacted your sleep habits? At the high school, 16% said they go to bed earlier with a later start time. 57 said no change. And then 27% say, I go to bed later. And at middle school, you can see that data. 10% go earlier, 65% no change, and 26% say they go to bed later. Okay, any questions on any of that data before I look, we walk to the 3 models? Okay, we can always go back if you do. Okay, so the first model I'm going to share tonight is really a modification of what we're currently doing. And it recognizes that you know, we want to be mindful of the length of the instructional day across levels. And that became a challenge as we tinkered with these minutes at both the elementary and the high school level. So in this first option, it takes our current model and it actually moves the day a little bit earlier for our elementary students. You can see the drop time at the elementary buildings is 7:15, and their school day would start at 7:30. That would be an end time of 1:30. Buses would roll about 1:45, and the late bus would be 3 afternoons a week at 2:30. That's a 6-hour instructional day, 5 minutes more than what we currently have. At the high school, we slid the start time back a little bit from what it is this year. And they would be actually starting at 8:15 with an 8:05 drop time. But the end of the day would stay the same, 2:57 end, 3:05 depart, and a 3:45 late bus. That's a 6-hour and 42-minute day. That allows us to do all of the programming, to have a homeroom, and you know, have the full instructional day. In order to do this, the middle school gets that later spot. The drop time would be 9 o'clock with a start at 9:10. The end time, that 3:45 should look familiar. That is, in fact, when the buses can get to the middle school. They would roll at 3:50. The late bus would be at 4:20. And that, again, would be 3 days after school. We're looking to go back to a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday configuration, and that's a 6-hour and 35-minute day. So this is closest to what we're currently doing right now. So it has some pros and cons. I'm guessing you're thinking about all of those. On the pro side, this is consistent with the sleep research for adolescents. So our middle and high schoolers would have a later start time. It gets rid of unsupervised time at the beginning and the end of day for Guilderland High School. We don't have that problem this year, but if you go back pre-COVID, one of the problems we were always trying to solve was the time between 7:05 when the buses would drop students outside the high school and 7:30 when classes started. That was like the no man's land of supervision, very challenging for our administrators who were vastly outnumbered by students. And we had a similar circumstance at the end of the day, too. Dismissal was at 2:23, but the buses didn't arrive till 2:42 in that neighborhood. So at the end of the day, we had lots of pent-up high school student energy and waiting for school buses. This model eliminates that challenge. In this model, there's no need to shorten the instructional day at the high school. There were a lot of concerns about that because every minute counts toward instructional time for lots of reasons, lab requirements and so on at the high school. And it actually adds 5 minutes of instructional time at the elementary schools. On the other side of the ledger, one of the problems that we have now and that this would not fix is that our career and technical education buses that take our students to the CTE Center and also to the Tech Center over at Mahonison, they don't align with our day very well at all. So we need additional runs to make those times happen for our students so they get to that program on time. So that adds extra runs to our day, and it's a challenge for the students, it's a challenge for transportation, it's not optimal. The other con here is this will equate to a very early pickup time for our elementary students. There's just no way around that. It does lead to that late end of the day for our middle school students at FMS. And then we have the need for supervision in the morning at FMS because school doesn't start till 9:10. A lot of parents need to get their children to the school because they have to get to work, don't want them home unsupervised. We've had that for years. We have a way of managing it. It's not ideal. If we were to do this, I think we need to add some additional supervision to make that better. And then in this model, we have students at both the middle and the high school who, because they participate in athletics, miss instructional time at the end of the day. Dave Austin put together a huge chart for the committee to show that it's a substantial number of minutes for a substantial number of students. Less at the middle school, more at the high school, but it's still a lot of students who are affected by that. So let me pause there. That's elementary first, and see if there are any clarifying questions. Go ahead, Seema.
So the cons, when you talk about the miss time for athletics, that would also be like students who work maybe after school, like high school students?
It would delay the point at which they can start their jobs, for sure. And when we were in the COVID year of the 10 o'clock start and the 4:20 end, we heard from many, many families about the challenge of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is high school first. And this is similar times. It would start with a 7:15 drop at the high school with a 7:30 start. The end time is interesting here, though. It's a 2:40 end of the day, but if you see my little note at the bottom, we would have the regular school day, so the regular 4 blocks of the day would actually end at 2:02 p.m. And the time between 2:02 and 2:40 would be something that we're calling Dutch connection, which would be an everyday period of time for all students to have access to their teachers for extra help. So there would only be one bus at the end of the school day at 2:40, and that would depart at 2:50, and there would be no late buses at the high school. So we can talk about what that time would be used for, but I think I have it in the next slide about how that would play out. So that's a 6-hour and 32-minute school day plus Dutch connection, so a lot of instructional time. The elementary, the drop time would be 8 o'clock with an 8:05 start, a 1:45 end of the day, a 1:55 depart, and a 2:45 late bus. You can already see the big con here. That is a 5-hour and 40-minute day, which is very short. Remember, we're currently at 5 hours and 55 minutes in what we're doing right now. And then in this model, middle school they can be dropped at 8:45, start at 8:55, end at 3:30, depart at 3:40 in a 4:10 late bus, and that's a 6-hour and 35-minute block of time. So some pros on this model. This really solves the CTE and Mahonison bus runs because those students can take their regular bus from their home to the high school and then get on a transfer bus. INHO tells me that this model would save about 4 runs, 2 of them being contract runs, which we don't know what the cost of them might be right now because we haven't bid them, but they sometimes run as high as $60,000, so it's a significant dollar amount. Another plus is an earlier and start-end time for Farnsworth. It moves that a few minutes back. There's less instructional time lost at the end of the day for athletes, but it doesn't take that away completely. There is still some lost time. It's a later pickup time for our elementary students. And then the other plus is that there's extra help or time to do our social emotional learning or our diversity, equity, and inclusion work built into the end of every single school day for the high school. So every student would be in the building for that additional time. You'll see the note would likely require an MOA with our Teachers Association. It depends on how we would use that time. If all we did was say students are going to be with a teacher for extra help, we would not need to negotiate anything. But if we were to ask teachers to do lessons in SEL or DEI, we would. So we are thinking about how we might deliver that without needing to ask teachers to do extra instructional work, but that's something we would need to figure out. The con side of this, 2 big ones. One, it is not consistent with the sleep research. So it would put Guilderland High School students back to almost where we were pre-pandemic. And then the need to shorten the elementary school day by 15 minutes from the current year. Our elementary colleagues on the task force really struggled with this, I have to be honest with you. And it would have curricular implications. You know, the elementary folks have a short day to begin with compared to other suburban council schools, and it's not like the curriculum becomes less each year. There's always more and more demands. But that's the high school first. And then the last one I'm going to share,
Question?
oh, sure.
For the middle school, when it says late bus, is that 3 days a week?
Yes, we would go back to 3 days a week for late buses.
And then I just have one more question, that the Dutch connection, that's at the end of the day.
Yes.
Is there a reason why they didn't do it at the beginning of the day? Oh, okay.
So what that would do is mean at 2:02, if I'm needing to get on a bus to go to Saratoga to play
I got it.
soccer, I'm missing extra help, which of course isn't the best thing either, but it's not as like missing class time.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Judy and then Rebecca.
The elementary late bus is the same, essentially the same time as the high school. How does that work? Do we not need as many buses?
I had the same question for INHO the other morning. I'm looking at this like, how does this work? It does, because there's a fewer number of buses
Okay.
needed.
I thought that, but it looks kind of strange to have.
It does. I had a moment of panic, one of many. Rebecca, then Blanca.
Would the Dutch connection be mandatory, so like for the students that have a job, like Sima was referring to?
I mean, we really didn't talk about it not being mandatory. This is part of the program of the school day. Because we don't want, I don't think we would want, cars showing up at 2:02 to bring everybody home. I think that would kind of defeat the purpose, although I see Mr. Piscatelli shaking his head. So yes, that its expectation is that it'd be for all kids. Go ahead, Blanca.
So clubs and such would also take place between 2:02 and 2:15?
They could be during the Dutch Connection too.
Okay, and it was a two-parter, sorry. Kim.
That's fine.
Have we considered how changing our schedule would impact athletes in terms of, they have to meet other schools to play? You know what I mean? So,
Yes. So that was these comments where you see instructional time lost at the end of the day for athletes. That's the data that Dave Austin actually put together for us. And it goes pages and pages and pages. It's a lot of kids every day who need to leave early to get on a bus in order to get wherever they're going.
okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Kim.
Will the students be assigned to a specific room during that time? Because I'm just curious if a student doesn't need extra help or they're doing well if they're just wandering the building until the bus comes. So will they all be accounted for, or?
Block 4, they would stay with their Block 4 teacher.
Oh,
Unless they needed to say, I'm getting an A+ in English, which I have Block 4, but I'm not doing so great in Algebra 2, so.
The idea is that they would have the ability to use nanny teacher, but they would have a home base with a Blackboard teacher.
thank goodness. Okay.
Yeah, I think we don't want any wandering the building.
Yes.
Any other questions on this one? So the third model I'll show, I'll say this. This one has middle school first and the elementary schools last. This was kind of a late-breaking option during the very last minutes of our very last task force meeting. The committee really gave me feedback, largely via email and such, because we just ran out of time. But there was, concern that the middle school is always at the end of the day, and what are the challenges associated with that? So the question was, well, what if we did middle school first? And this is what happens. So again, 7:15 drop at FMS with the 7:25 start. The end of the day would be 1:49. I'm not quite sure why it ended up 1:49. We have lots of round numbers, but and it would roll at 1:55, and there would be late buses, again, 3 days a week at 2:30 for a 6-hour and 29-minute day. The high school would have an 8:18 drop, and I want to talk a little bit about that. One of the unknowns here, because we've never done the middle school first, is how long it takes to get the buses from the back of FMS out to Western Ave, out to their neighborhoods, and then down to 146. In all the other models that we've talked about, the ones today and then the 52 others that we discussed in the committee, we thought it was about 55 minutes between those runs. Inho and Jerry did a little time study, and it's 13 minutes to get from the back parking lot to Western Ave. So we added 13 minutes onto the plan to give us some level of confidence that it actually could happen, that all those buses with all that traffic could get out of the middle school, get out to Western Ave, turn right, turn left, do their runs, and then get down to GHS. We thought about, is traffic better at 7:15 on Western Ave than it is at 8:15 or 9:15? And the answer is, it might be a little better, but we are the problem. I mean, if you drive down Western Ave during February break, everyone else is doing their thing and we're not, and you can sail right through. So that is, something that I just want to put out there, because I know Inho thinks about that too, and we want this to work. So that's the 8:18 start, drop time, with the 8:33 start at the high school. This model also has the built-in Dutch connection. The regular school day would end at 3:10. Dutch connection would be at 3:58. Departure would be at 4:05, and there would be no late bus, and that's 6 hours and 37 minutes. Go ahead, Blanca.
So Dave Austin isn't here, so I'm not sure if anyone else knows, but what time do meets usually take place? So, or matches or games?
So that middle one exacerbates the issue with lost instructional time, because right now we end at 2:57.
Okay.
This adds 3:10, so it adds 13 minutes, which I think I have on the next slide. So it makes the missed instructional time at the high school level greater.
And then at the middle school level, what are the athletes supposed to do? Because don't they have to wait for all the other schools to be dismissed to meet? Aren't they typically like at 4 or so? So I'm just wondering what happens for,
They would have some
right, a couple hours. Okay.
potential downtime. And then the athletes at the middle school who come up to play with the high school, they also would have there would be some gaps in time there.
Okay. Okay.
And then at the elementary level, we're looking at a 9:03 drop and a 9:10 start, at 3:10 end of the day, 3:18 depart, and a 3:55 late bus, again, 3 days, and that's us back to a 6-hour school day. And the pros and cons, the pros are, continues to be consistent for research for the high school students. It builds in the extra help that we talked about already. It eliminates the before-school supervision at both Farnsworth and the high school. Potentially, it's less after-school childcare needed at the elementary level, and it's less instructional time lost for FMS athletes, essentially none. But the cons are, it's not consistent with the sleep for middle school students because they're up early. It increases the gap for the career and tech ed and Mohan bus runs. That makes that gap even bigger. It adds 13 additional minutes of lost instructional time for our high school athletes. And then we're likely to have parents who need before school care at the elementary level, so we may have some who need before and after care. Right now, I was talking with a couple of our elementary principals. At the middle school, we do this before school care, and the students go to the cafeteria area and they're largely entertained by their phones. You can't do that with little ones. We would have to have something much more structured at the elementary level if we were going to attempt to do that. So that's all of them. I think I've lived up to my promise to say that none of them are perfect. But I'm open to comments, questions, thoughts, clarifications. Go ahead,
I just have
Seema.
a question for the second option, where it says the CTE and Mohan runs align better. We know that for sure, like those are set times already for next year.
CTE starts at 8 o'clock over at the center over on at the Waterville Shaker Road. So yes, that would line up.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you go back a slide so we see the times for option 2?
Yep.
There we go, thanks. I have questions for the principals.
That's why they're here.
Is now the time?
Now's the time. Andy, we might need the microphone because I'm pretty sure yeah.
How to break? So I was just wondering if any principals have any strong opinions or preferences. Is anyone, like last year in particular, I like to pick on you. Just, is there one you absolutely hate, anyone, or one that you think is the least worst or anything?
As a member of the, thank you for the question. As a member of the Start Time Task Force since the beginning, like Dr. Wiles said, we've looked at many, many, many different options. What I can tell the board is this year's middle school schedule is chaos. I think one of the challenges that we have is not having 3 days after school activity period eliminates the opportunities for kids to do extracurricular, to do intramurals, and we know at the middle level that's extremely important during the 3 years that they're with us. So this year has been challenging because on Wednesdays they have to pick which club am I going to go to? Am I going to go to intramural? Am I going to stay for after school extra help? The equity piece, the morning activity period, that's real. That didn't work. Students who need to come to activity period to get academic assistance, a lot of them have a hard time getting a ride in the morning. So by not providing transportation, that's a huge equity piece for me. My priority is to return to 3 days after school activity period. We need to be able to provide that for middle school kids. I'd like not to end any later than we are now. I mean, right now, our activity period on the one day we have it is at 4:20. Prior to the pandemic, our activity period ended at 4:05, so we're really talking about 15 minutes here. In the morning, though I don't have all of my buses starting, I have kids not arriving during homeroom either, so that's also on the front end of our day a challenge. So whatever level goes first, second, or last, there's going to be trade-offs. There's going to be some decisions that need to be made, and I don't know if any of them are perfect. As a parent in the district, my children and my family have had to deal with the 3 different start times. One time we're early, one time we're in the middle, one time we're in, the later route. So every few years we have to adjust, and I think that's the situation for most of our families. I don't want a late day for kids at the middle level because I think it impacts them greatly. But at this point, we just need to make a decision so we can start to plan some of the other things associated with this, because there's a lot of logistics in terms of teacher contractual workday, when we're going to have meetings, when we're going to allow the clubs to meet. So those are the decisions that also need to be made. So that's why, I don't know if I have a preference. I have priorities that I'm advocating for the middle level child.
It sounds like most of them are addressed, I think, best in option 2.
The only one with option 2 is I would say the option 2 is the one that has the high school going back to the first route. And, that will, the cons there is the inconsistency with the sleep research. One of the questions I have is whether or not the decision we made resulted in enough gains for high school students. And I guess that's the piece that I struggle with at night, because I really have not seen any data to suggest that the decision that we made resulted in huge gains for high school students' academic excellence or involvement in extracurricular, or what I can show you the data is the impact on the middle level child. So I can give you the information there. So that's, I guess, how I would answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
How about you, Mike? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Sorry, Barb.
No,
Yeah.
for you. If I understood correctly, option 1, which is close to what we have this year, but does give the elementary more time.
Yep.
I understand that it would give you the 3 days of after-school.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes,
So
with
that
the first
addresses-
model, we are anticipating running our late bus 3 days a week, going back to Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, which
Right.
would eliminate that problem. I would still have to, we at the middle level with this model would still have to deal with the morning, opening up the cafeteria option. We open up the doors at 8 o'clock, so now we're talking, 70 minutes of students, between 60 and 65 minutes that we would have students in the building. Now, most of the students in the morning at the middle level are either going to the cafeteria morning program, attending some ensemble courses, or some of our enrichment courses. So we do have a fair amount of kids who do go to some programming in the morning. Again, there's no transportation, so parents would have to drop. So that would add a little bit more time to manage in the morning. In the afternoon, my concern would be, kiddos leaving on a late bus, if they're up on the hill, they're getting home at 5:15, 5:30, and if they have other commitments after school, that puts a tax on families.
Now, over the years, that has always been the case, though. If I'm not mistaken, they get there later than the kids that live in Westmere.
So this elementary model first, if you go to pre-pandemic, we started at 8:45, and our late bus was rolling at 4:15. 4:10 on a good day, because our activity period ended at 4:05. So we're really talking in this model about 10 to 15 minutes, a little bit later. Difference.
Okay.
Yep.
And the other advantage, I think, that I heard on this model, besides it being consistent with the whole purpose of the study and the research, is that the high school will get back its homeroom? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
with this model.
And also, the elementary school will pick up some time, and I think we heard from the elementary principal that particularly number 2 is just totally off the radar because of the shortening of the elementary day, where they told us in the task force that it's shorter than many days in the capital district, and they still have to do the same amount of material.
Yeah, I think the majority of our elementary colleagues are most concerned about losing an additional 15 minutes of instructional time at the K-5 level. So,
And then, can I continue, or do you want somebody else to ask a question? On number 3, if you want to pull that one up, the high school would get out at 3:50, and if we're talking lost instructional time, you're talking at least an hour plus, correct?
for my level,
No, for the high school level.
for high school.
And the other question, so both of you, it sort of concerns, if the middle school gets out at 1:50 and the high school doesn't get out until 3:50, any of the athletes, are they just supposed to hang around the middle school for a couple of hours before they go up to the high school? That seems,
With this model, my morning management challenge becomes an afternoon management challenge. So,
right,
you know, while we have our cafetorium open in the morning now for our morning program and kids can have breakfast and do some work in there, I would have to create that opportunity at the end of the day for a student athlete study hall or some type of concept like that to have students, because to your point, if it's a student who's playing up, then they won't be able to start athletics until the high school's done. Modified athletics can start, but still, I mean, we won't start interscholastic competition. Most of our games don't start till 4:15 against the rest of the Suburban Council, so we'll still have to have something in the afternoon
right.
to supervise students while we wait for the other levels to get out. Specifically the high school, if it's going to be a student athlete who's playing up.
Right. And I know a lot of our Suburban Council schools, when the kids come in the morning for the ensembles and choir and clubs and stuff like that, it is a responsibility of the parents to get them there. And what I hear you're saying is that some kids can't get that ride, and so they would miss out on the ensembles and things such as that.
Yes,
Okay.
for sure.
Thank you.
I don't even know if you guys can answer this, so I apologize. With option 1 for elementary first, how is that going to affect the self-contained classrooms at the elementary school? Because they're coming in from different districts. Because that's affecting 3 classrooms there.
I don't think I can quickly answer that, because it's possible, let's say every child in that class, in those self-contained was from a different district, we could probably flex the time a little bit, because it's our buses that are pressed to get on the road again.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we could probably figure that out. But I don't know, we haven't done that nuance of it yet. But I can see in Ho's wheels spinning here, literally.
Well, I mean, what happens on an annual basis is, you know, like we house the DHH program for middle level.
Yeah.
So we have students from other districts who get bussed in, and we tell BOCES, look, this is our start of our school day, and then they work with the other school districts to get the buses to campus at, around the time of our start day. So I would anticipate the conversations would be similar once we make a decision on when is our start time, to say to the BOCES, hey, DHH programming at the middle level is going to start at 8:40 or 8:55 in this model. So you mean you have to get the kiddos here by that time to start.
Okay.
Mike, could you go back to my first question? Do you want me to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Okay. You asked the question a while ago about what preference. I kind of would answer it like Mike. Every model has its advantages and disadvantages. There's aspects of each one I like. In the survey data, when we asked the students about the current model, what they liked, we did get a lot of positive feedback from students about liking the later start time. I think it's important to note when we're talking about option 2 with the 7:30 high school start, I think you almost got to think back to what it was like pre-pandemic. One of the reasons why the elementary day is shrinking in this new model versus what it was before is because the drop-off at the high school was 7:05 so that we could make sure that the elementary runs, we maintain that length of that instructional day. But with the it didn't just have the problem of that we had these students unsupervised for 25 minutes. It was also if you remember the start time task force back then, we were looking at pickup dates or times for those kids. We had some students that were getting picked up at 6:05 in order to make a 7:05 drop off. So it kind of had a domino effect other than just that unsupervised time that I just wanted to call attention to. As Mike said, we've lived through a 7:30 start, we've lived through a 10 o'clock start, a 9:30 start, and now an 8:20 start. We can make anything work. I like the Dutchman connection for a lot of reasons we liked it before we started talking about any of the pandemic and start time stuff. So I think we can make it work. It's just, like I said, everything's going to have some cons with it that we're going to have to live with.
Mike?
Yes.
No, go ahead, Bert.
Just to follow up on that Dutchman connection, originally when we talked about it, and as you said, everybody liked the concept, but it was going to be during the school day. It wasn't a tack on at the end.
Correct.
And we thought that it might require some negotiations. It sounds like this is still going to require some negotiations.
Potentially.
But why, so it's nothing definite. That is sort of like the selling points for looking at 2 and 3, but there's actually no guarantee, and yet the ideal situation was to have it during the school day itself.
I think originally when we were talking about, first of all, when we originally talked about this idea, it had the high school, I'm trying to remember, our times have shifted so many times now. I think it was around 3:10 end of the day when we were looking at it. And that Dutchman connection, we were going to link it to the beginning of third block was kind of the idea. In this current model, the reason why I was looking at it as it was right now was we definitely have seen the problem with athletics this year and cutting into the fourth block classes. We've had students that are leaving. I actually just talked to Dave this week about we've had some classes, some teams that have been leaving at 2:15, and we're like, wait, well, we're cutting way too close into it. So we're trying to maintain it, but even on a good day, it's 2:30. And so that means in our days ending at 2:57, so they're losing a half hour of instruction to go to these competitions. So when we were looking at that model, it was, okay, yes, it's not ideal for for the athletes to miss Dutchman connection, but it's better for them to miss that than to miss a class. And that was the idea.
Now, I know Rebecca's concern with the Dutchman connection is she wanted everybody to sort of have access to it. And that sort of blows that away a little bit. And if
yes and no,
Yeah.
because it depends on, it's game days, right? It's
Yeah.
not every day, it's game days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the SEL portion, or Positivity Project, whatever we decide to do with the DEI stuff, again, that's going to have to be contractual because that would be considered lessons. And
We'd have to analyze that and figure out how to handle that. Yeah.
additional cost or whatever, or have to change planning periods, whatever magical things you guys do.
But to answer Mike's question, because I think it's a real point, we need to settle on a schedule so that we can start answering these questions. We can't even have a conversation with the union right now to say, what is your viewpoint on this time? Because we've got 3 different models we're looking at. So we do have to land on something so that we can have conversations, design things, and build our master schedule for next year, which we're in the process of doing right now, so.
I have two questions, and maybe you, Dr. Wells, can answer. One, you said all of these have a little bit of fine tuning, right? All of the options.
Meaning what they just said, I don't think we can fine tune the minutes on.
Right, not the minutes, but in terms of like contractual pieces and all of that.
Yep.
And then the second question is, so I know we're not going to vote on this until the next meeting, but I'm leaning towards the high school first option, and I know we have some time to think about it, but I know it shortens the elementary day, and then but the elementary start time is later than it is now, and I've heard, and I think several of you have heard from a handful of elementary teachers about starting even earlier than the time right now is terrible, which I agree with. So, you know, if they had to balance, I don't have an elementary principal here, starting later versus losing some time, would you say that a lot of people feel like starting a little bit later for elementary would be?
I think the two principals who were on the committee, it was Dr. Lockwood and Dr. Beanie, were adamant that they don't want to lose time. Okay. And both of them said, at one meeting or another, that at the early start time, they didn't hear a lot of people complaining about the early start time this year. They complained about traffic, for sure, but their bigger concern was the lost start time. You know, these guys were there, corroborate. Lots of hands.
Nate, go ahead.
All right. I know you said that Dave put together a big spreadsheet. Can we just get an actual number of how many students are affected, student athletes are actually leaving early or missing time? Or just a rough number?
It fluctuates by season,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, today is an example. I had 3 teams leaving at 2:40. So the kids were released at 2:20. All right? So they're missing most of the last mod 13. In this model, they'd, well, actually, this model is sort of the way we have it this year, so it would be sort of similar to that. Now, I don't have, depending on the season, it depends on how many kids play up, who have to get up, who have to get the high school buses to away games. Now, this is also just for away games, too. So for home games, it's less of an impact because the kids can stay in classes a little bit later. So anything that has the middle level later than this, we're talking kids are missing mod 12, mod 13 if they're a student athlete and they have to go to an away game. And that's all based upon where they have to go. So going to Saratoga is a lot different than going to Colony. So it's all based upon distance and how many kids selectively classified to play up. We have more flexibility at the modified athletic schedule because we can start that up a little bit later. But it's those away games specifically to those, farther away suburban council schools that tend to really, really impact both level. So it's really a matter of which level is going to get the impact.
Yeah, just adding on to that, if you think about like a high school athletic schedule, if the varsity is home, most likely the JV is away. So there's always someone going away every single day.
Yeah, I was just trying to get an idea of numbers
I'm sure we
I know
can
it's
share
difficult.
that.
I think we can, but I think it's hundreds.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to
Yes.
get at.
And again, like Mike said too, it's like right now, track and field, we have so many students participating in track and field, that has a big impact.
And they have their varsity, JV, and freshmen all at the same time, so they leave at the same time.
Kelly?
In the elementary first, can you just remind me, is the Dutch connection at the end of the day, or is it not in that one at all? I forgot.
Right
Lost
now,
track.
it's designed at the end of the day. So it basically.
It's not in this one at all.
I'm sorry. With the elementary first, no, it's not at all. We can't do that and make it work with transportation in that situation.
So no
Dutch
levels have
connection.
Dutch
There is no Dutch connection in the elementary
It's just for
first.
high school.
And so we would just do a traditional 3-day week after school activity period.
And another question, do we have any idea of, like, I don't know, maybe you're not there yet, but how much the the CTE Manhattan runs would affect the budget? If we had, it says, it doesn't align well, just wondering, does that mean?
Can I give you an example? Just every schedule, I feel like I have to figure out the CTE schedule impact on it. So typically, a morning CTE programs, we usually transport at 7:30 and it starts at 8 o'clock. And then they leave their CTE program at 10:30 and get back approximately at 11. And so no matter what schedule you're looking at, you're working with that schedule because that's not going to change. And then in the afternoon, we leave at 10:30 for an 11 o'clock start, and then their program ends at 1:30, and they come back to the high school at 2. So, like, even in this model, just to give you a quick example, if they're getting back at 2, usually the bigger impact for us, it's interesting. The morning CTE students have to be transported directly from their house right now to the CTE program because the high school starts too late for them to come to the high school and go there. So, but then in the afternoon, those students are coming back at 2 o'clock, so we structured their schedule so they take the afternoon CTE students take a first block class, go to a study hall, then go to CTE, come back and take another class. But they miss anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes of class time because their program's ending right as we're just starting the 4th block class. And that's about, to give you an idea of numbers, that's roughly about 38 kids in the morning session and same in the afternoon, just to give you kind of a ballpark.
So as Mike said, with the CTE, we have 2 buses sort of east and west divided, and they will pick up the students and go straight to CTE. Where if we went back to high school being first, what ends up happening is because we align better with other schools, non-public schools, out-of-district schools, we should be able to save actually 2 additional runs. And that, as Dr. Wiles pointed out, our contractors the prices are increasing. We could be looking at up to $65,000 or upwards. Because we align a little bit better, we can consolidate and save the district a little bit money. Because what ends up happening is then if we went high school first, the transfer station will be at the high school. So we will pick up all the students, collect them in our normal high school run, and then drop them here at the high school. They will be divided, and then we can deploy them to out-of-district schools.
Thank you, that's all.
Go ahead, Bob.
Wait, and how-
Rebecca, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say, I think the bottom line is there's just immutable problems that our district has, right?
Yeah.
That are not changeable. So the geography is not going to change. The traffic pattern on Western Avenue is not going to change. If we could wave a magic wand and have all of the schools start between 8 and 8:30 or 8 and 8:45, I think everyone in this room would be thrilled, right? Like, that would be ideal. But that is not possible. So we have to accept the fact that we're not going to get everything we want. I've been a strong proponent of late high school start time, as has Barb. It's how I got involved in the board. But I can't ignore what the educators are saying. And they're describing, the middle school experience this year as chaos. I think that's the word you just used. The first option has the middle school starting 10 minutes later than it does this year. So the same problems that you've experienced this year are going to be, increased by at least 10 minutes if we repeat the same pattern next year. So for that reason, I really can't in good conscience support option 1. Option 2 has a lot of negatives, not the least of which is that the high school would revert back to the earlier start time, which is counter to the science and counter to the whole reason why we started the task force in the first place. But I think the potential benefits of the Dutch connection can hopefully negate some of those disadvantages and would ultimately be more equitable as it's available to all the students every single day, and could even help potentially mitigate some of that pandemic learning loss. I am concerned, though, about that shortened elementary school time, and I'm wondering if we save those runs from the CTE, if we could shave even just a couple minutes on either end. You're shaking your head. There's no chance.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, I still think option 2, though, and it saddens me to say it, but I still think option 2 would be my first choice at this point.
Every minute counts.
Yeah.
And that's what we're learning. And as Dr. Wiles pointed out in the beginning, if you shave 1 minute here, then there is a domino effect that will follow. So that's where the difficulty lies.
Is there one that you really are hoping we won't pick, or?
Well, if you're asking me out of the 3, which is my least favorite,
Yeah.
it would be the middle school first, simply because we've never done that option, so I just don't know what the traffic pattern will be. And even before we can get out to on the road, start picking up students, we have to at least have 13 minutes, and that's a long time.
This question kind of pertains to you as well. Just with the option of the high school starting first, I mean, it does concern me that the elementary school would be missing the 20 minutes. But would there be, and this would be for you as well, would there be any way that, like, let's say we had some type of enrichment after school where kids had an option to maybe do something that catches them up with that time? Would that completely throw, like, after school late busing? Like, are you going to, like, follow me to the parking lot for suggesting that, or is that just?
The work has been done.
Are you saying add more time?
Well, because I know, for example, like Pine Bush has 3 late buses. And so let's say there's something, because that's a 20-minute loss per day, that we say, okay, you know what, we're going to maybe do some type of enrichment for certain grades, certain days, where they're able to maybe catch up on that time that they're missing just after school doing things. I mean, maybe even change it up so it covers that, but it's just, I don't know, it's too preliminary. But would that throw you off for buses? Like, if a lot of kids decide to?
Yeah, I would have to know how many buses at what time to make sure that in the equation of all the different moving pieces that it would fit.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Last question. Oh,
Go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering about our students, our trusty camera people. I think some of you are graduating, but are there? You're all seniors, right? So you probably don't care, but I'm just kidding. Is there one here that you would have absolutely hated this year, or one that you really think is great?
James, answer the question. Hi, Natalie. Thanks, James.
Hello. As seniors, we've been talking a little bit, we have one, sorry, I was eating cashews. We have one sort of concern, really, which is in options 2 and 3, which is the Dutch connection and how that works with maintaining clubs and time spent right now and after school, sort of doing more extracurricular activities. And if Dutchman Connect is supposed to be mandated, you stay with your 4th block teacher or you go somewhere else for help, that eliminates a lot of opportunities for extracurriculars that we have right now in our after-school period. So as far as what I think we're most concerned about is option 2 and 3 and how Dutchman Connection can be used.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe if we were to think it through a little more with 2 and 3, as to can't we have extracurriculars during that time, right? So, yes. Okay, gotcha, but we would have to take that into consideration, okay.
Yeah, but it's just weird if you're trying to do DEI or, what's it called, the
Social emotional
positivity project during that time, and a lot of students are leaving. I mean, as they are, it would be an interesting survey, I know surveys are hard, but of how students spend their activity period time. I know, personally, I have never gone to a teacher in my activity period. I always use it for, my clubs, and I think a lot of people do the same thing. So maybe Dutchman Connect would not be, it would be a big change from how we use activity period right now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, James.
I have one last question. So I know that we're going to, well, first as a comment, I just want to thank everybody on the start time committee, because this sounds like, well, this is like pre-COVID, so this seems like it's going on forever, and it also sounds really like a logistical nightmare, so thanks for everybody serving on that committee. And So I just want to say that I think whatever we land on, I'll feel good that we've done like due diligence and looked at all of these so much. Because right now I'm leaning towards, like I mentioned, high school first, which is kind of why we started this whole thing. But kind of like Mr. Laster said before, I feel like the gains that we see from changing what has changed already, I don't see that. And there's so many other losses I see that, again, they all have losses, but I feel like that's the one that has the biggest. But we will vote on this, correct, Dr. Wiles, at the next board meeting?
Yes, yeah.
So we have some time to think about it. Oh, go ahead, Barb.
I just want to lobby for number one, because it fulfills what we're here to do, and it restores the homeroom to the high school so that everybody will be together and will have access to a homeroom, and that's where you can do some of the instruction that you haven't been able to do this year. We've heard from the elementary school principals that the parents don't mind the early start. The kids love the early start because they're up and early.
My kids are not. His kids are not. We're on the same street. Yeah, but our kids are not.
Same. I'm just looking at the parent response that when the kids get up, they normally get up between 6 and 7.
It was a nightmare.
And it gives the elementary teachers the time that they need. And one of the comments that was made as we had our meetings is that, some of the response that we've gotten, particularly from the staff, sort of is more towards their needs versus the student needs. And so, I would just throw that out, that we restore the 3 bus runs, after-school bus runs to the middle school doing this. We get the homeroom period back to the high school, and the elementary parents seem to be okay according to the, this is what our principals are telling us, that.
Yeah, I'm just saying that myself and every other elementary parent I know would think even starting earlier than what time it is. My daughter's bus comes at 7:05 in the dark, and then my middle school kid comes at 8:45. That time difference of what I can do in the morning is insane. So to go even earlier for elementary school, because yes, that's 7:30 start time, but the bus pickup is during the 6 o'clock time period in the morning, which is insane for elementary. That's just my opinion. I know we're talking about how we feel, and they all have cons, but I think to go even earlier for elementary school is, I think we'll hear from parents.
Is there an option 4?
Yeah, the elementary first, it's like our kids in the winter are going to be out in the dark, like little kids.
They already are,
And-
yeah.
Yeah, and so, even with bus stops, things like that, it's just, that makes me a little anxious. And same with Nate and Seema, he's my elementary kid is my hardest to get up in the morning. It's insane.
I don't think it's just teachers. I know, like, what I'm thinking of with all of these, what's best for kids.
Right.
And it's not just high school kids, it's all the kids. So they all will have some cons, like I said. But I don't think, I know that we started all this thinking about the high school students and the sleep time first, but I just don't see the gains. But I also don't think it's just, I know you said that we've heard from a couple of teachers about the start time for elementary school, but I don't think they were just advocating for themselves and their schedule. They talked about the logistics in their classroom and the kids, so.
Well, particularly the 3 classes at Altamont.
Yeah.
Kids coming in from other districts.
Right.
I think in Whole, somebody said that when we set the starting time, then the other districts do adjust to try to get the kids there at that starting time. So, I read that letter and I was worried about the same thing, but we've just been assured that those kids, by their districts would get them to whatever time, we set as our starting time.
Yeah, part of that letter, they were also worried about the kids acclimating, because that set of kids, they said it was harder for them to actually have that change within their schedule and have to come in earlier. Then they still have to unpack and have their breakfast and do everything. So they were worried that they were going to have issues as well.
Real quick, Mike, what's the pre-COVID start time for high school?
It was 7:30.
It's going back exactly to the same what it was for. It's 30 years, probably. Yeah.
I'm a lot shorter than James. Yeah, pre-COVID, we were 7:30 start, 2:23 end, and we had an activity period that went to 3:10.
Mike, you said that the students do like the later start time from your experience.
Yeah, the feedback, I mean, this is based on the comments that were on the student survey. I would say the majority were positive. So.
Inho, what is the pickup time if we do 7:30 start time for the high school, like on average? Are the kids going to be out there at 6:30?
6:30, I would have to look at that. Pickup, so we would be dropping at 7:15. Some may be 6:30, yes.
Okay.
I mean, this whole, I hear what Mike's saying. I mean, who doesn't want to get, I mean, I would love to start my job later. I mean, that seems like a pretty obvious, I mean, but I'm looking at this, these surveys for what they're worth, is at the high school level, it didn't change their sleep patterns, which is really the whole reason, is to get more sleep. So what they're really doing is they're going to bed later so they can go to school later. Which is what.
They just shifted.
Yeah.
They just shifted their bedtime because, okay, I don't have to get to school at 8:30 or whatever it is. I don't have to get there at 7:30. So we're not really, it's not solving the issue of what we were trying to solve, which is to get them more sleep.
Sorry, yeah, and then hundreds of kids are missing instructional time because of athletics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a comment about this year at the middle school. I don't mean to pick on you, but it was rough for kids who had mask. So your kid was also in mask. They had to find a teacher to beg that would house them between the end of the school day and before masks started. And I heard later on of some kids who actually would hide in the bathroom and eat in the bathroom because they didn't want to go to the group cafeteria. You can't get them in trouble now because it's past. And so I just, so that struggle is real. Really, my own child was like, oh, I got, Mrs. So-and-so, Madame Coons said I could go there. So we need to negate that. That's a big problem, I think. Anyway.
Go ahead.
The maybe Marie knows, shortening of the elementary school day to 15 minutes, I mean, does that fall within the required curriculum timeframe? Isn't there a certain amount of time they have to spend on it, and how close does it come to that?
So it's not, it's
breaking it.
900 hours. So we make the 900 hours, but it's close.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, we wouldn't bring you a model where we weren't
Breaking rules.
Yeah, it
But
just
we're
sounds
close.
like that's a big chunk of time that's concerning.
If we do go with that model where the elementary kids are losing the 15 minutes, can we collect data to see how we compare in terms of kids learning loss or something qualitative? Or is it quantitative? Quantitative?
It could be both. I mean, I think one of the challenges in all of this is we don't have a good way to collect data on our students' experiences last year, or really this year, because their experiences were so unusual last year. So do we see increased student achievement this year because we changed the start time? No, but 100 other things went wrong in students' lives around COVID. So it's like we'd have to be master statisticians to be able to tease out the variables to say which of the things that happened in the past 2 years had an impact. So I don't know how much we could even measure what you're asking, Blanca, next year, because where are we now is even hard to define.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that's been hard about this work. If we didn't have the pandemic and we switched the start time, I think our data would be a lot cleaner. Attendance is terrible this year, but is it terrible because we started to change the start time? I don't think so. I think it's terrible for other reasons. We have a lot of students who are struggling academically, but I think it has more to do with the interrupted instruction at the end of 2020 and the hybrid model we had last year than it does to whenever we start the school day. And that's really the challenge with all of this. So And the other thing I'll say, because I'm sure there's going to be lots of people calling and writing and so on, none of this solves the traffic. So traffic, I don't care when we start FMS, Mike, it's going to be a nightmare because the one way in, one way out, the buses in the back, so many cars coming in all at the same time. It doesn't make, we could start at 3 in the morning and we're going to have a traffic problem at Farnsworth. And so, and ditto at GES because the runway up to the school is so short. And so I want to perhaps tamper down expectations that any of these will solve that problem because they won't. I mean, the problem at the middle school is an expensive capital project. So anyway, I want to echo what Seema said to thank people for their work on this and the thousands of hours that have gone into the what if, can we do this, can we do that? Mike had a couple over at the middle school who just pumped out options like a computer, right? And to Inho, who has so patiently looked at every last one of these to say, this works, this doesn't work. Because we didn't want to bring you anything that in the end would not work. So thanks to everybody who stayed with this, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of anticipation to see where we land.
I wonder if spending the thousands of hours trying to find more bus drivers would have been more effective solution
We've done
to
that
it.
too.
Seems like that's the limiting factor of all of it, bus drivers. My plea.
I just have
to
one more
public.
comment. So, I mean, I agree that losing the 15 minutes at the elementary school is far from ideal, and I wish we could fix it somehow magically. But I think to underscore, there's been instructional loss this year at the high school, unrelated to sports, right? Because no one arrives to school on time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said it before, but I'll just explain again. We originally, when we started the schedule, we had the homeroom attached to second block. And that's how we planned to start the year. That's where we were planning to focus on all our SEL and diversity activities. And then when we started off the school year, we were averaging, I want to say 9 routes. So basically about 1/3 of the routes were showing up after the start of school at the beginning of the school year. And so within a week and a half, 2 weeks, we were like, we can't maintain this because first block is losing time every single day. So we very rapidly changed the schedule and shifted the homeroom block to before first block, which I knew was going to be a disaster, and it has been a disaster all year. Right now, I would say we're probably down to probably 2 or 3 routes that show up after 8:20. And so I would say by 8:25, we have everybody in the building. But this year has created such a laissez-faire attitude about the start of school that it's like nobody gets to school on time. Like whether it's parent drop-offs, student drivers, or students going to get breakfast and then going kind of moseying and back to class. We're typically not starting first block till about 8:35, probably realistically. So, I mean, the one thing I will say about the elementary first model that's up there, though, is one of the things we've worked really hard on is to make sure that those times work with transportation. So when we say an 8:05 drop-off, that's an 8:05 drop-off. So we should be able to start at 8:15 with no problem. Still have to figure out the breakfast program. That's always going to be a little bit of a rub, so that we're going to have to figure out. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I know I have one more item.
Oh, it's a good item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
was a good
National
experience.
School Nurse Day. So my second informational item tonight is just to recognize the National School Nurse Day is next week, May 11th, 2022. And then since 1972, National School Nurse Day has been set aside on a Wednesday in May to recognize our school nurses. National School Nurse Day was established to foster a better understanding of the role school nurses play in the educational setting. And this year's theme is Bridging Healthcare and Education, recognizes that school nurses lead the way to support health and ensure that students are healthy, safe, and ready to learn. Perhaps this year more than ever, we want to thank our school nurses. Saying they go above and beyond doesn't begin to capture the work that they do, particularly for vast portions of this school year where it was because of them that our doors are open and our kids were in class, even if they did come late. So thank you to all of our nurses for all of the good work that they do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wiles. Next, we have board president information. I have 4 items. The first are the NYSBA reference dates. Information was sent or emailed by NYSBA to each board member regarding submitting resolutions and proposed bylaw amendments for consideration at the voting delegates at the annual business meeting in the fall. The annual process sets NYSBA's advocacy efforts through the proposal of new positions and the continuation or discontinuation of those set to expire. Only boards of education that are members of NYSBA and NYSBA Board of Directors may submit resolutions for consideration. Proposed resolutions, once adopted, may direct NYSBA to advocate either for or against a wide variety of legislative and regulatory issues at both the state and federal levels. And so you'll see there's a timeline there of key dates, and the resolution kit is attached. Next, we have the voter registration that's required for the May 17th vote, budget vote and election. The public vote on the school budget and Board of Education will be held on Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. Voter registration is required in the Guilderland School District. To vote, you must be 18 years old, a U.S. citizen, and a resident of the Guilderland School District for at least 30 days prior to the vote. If you're not registered with the school district or the Albany County Board of Elections, you must do so prior to the vote. You may register with the Albany County Board of Elections or through the DMV. The district has established 3 registration dates for residents to vote at the May 17th, 2022 budget vote and election. You may register anytime between 8:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. at one of the elementary schools, or from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at the district office on the following dates: Thursday, May 5th, Monday, May 9th, or Tuesday, May 10th. If you are not sure at which elementary school to vote, please refer to our webpage link, Budget and Taxes, and use that link that drops down, Voter Eligibility, and you can see where if you're registered and where you should vote for school elections. The next item is the upcoming Board of Education election. The deadline for Board of Ed candidates to return their completed petition was April 18th. There are 4 open spots. 3 seats are for a 3-year term of office, and 1 seat is for a 1-year term of office. The names of the candidates and their order on the ballot will be as follows: Katie DePiro, Nicole Coonrat, Kimberly Blasiak, April McAllister, Mark Reamer, Jennifer Romano, Kelly Person, William Carney, Gloria Tohill, and Barb Federico. Candidates do not run for a specific seat on the board. From the candidates, the individuals with the 4 highest vote totals will be elected. The candidates with the 3 highest vote totals will each serve a 3-year term of office that starts July 1st and ends in June 30th, 2025. The candidate with the next highest vote total will serve the 1-year term, which will begin immediately on May 18th and end on June 30th, 2023. The PTA Council will be hosting a Meet the Candidates Night on Monday, May 9th. This event will begin at 6 p.m. and will be live streamed on our YouTube channel. Next, we have a proposal to engage with Progression Partners. The Audit Subcommittee, which is part of the DEI Committee, brings to the board a recommendation to work with Progression Partners as a consultant to perform an equity audit for the district. The subcommittee has held multiple meetings over months to consider the most feasible approach to complete this audit as a first step in creating an equity action plan. The committee considered the scope of work, the overall objective for the audit, the kind of expertise needed, and the amount of time required to complete it. Recognizing that the scope of work is beyond what the subcommittee can complete Without assistance, they consulted with Cap Region BOCES to research consultants with expertise who can perform this work. The committee considered costs, expertise, and checked references with other districts in the Capital Region and New York State. Progression Partners, who is under contract with Cap Region BOCES, comes highly recommended and is able to provide 4 elements of this work: equity training, equity action planning, equity learning walks, and focus groups with students, staff, and parents. The cost is approximately $50,000 and can be funded through Title IV and Title II federal grants. And that's all I have. Next, we have action items. School business, Neil?
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. The first item this evening is a resolution to approve an agreement with CDB Connections.
Can I have a motion to approve the service agreement with CDB Connections? Judy, second Gloria. Any questions? All in favor? Passes 9-0.
Next is a resolution for available funds from the 2019 Capital Improvement Project. And the resolution states that the 2019 Capital Improvement Project can be accomplished in all material respects for less than the estimated total cost, and as such, hereby authorizes remaining available funds in the amount of $849,600 to be expended on needed heating and ventilation improvements deemed to be in the best interest of the district.
Can I have a motion to approve the capital improvement available funds? Nate, second Barb. Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Passes 9-0.
And then building off of that resolution, we have another one that is an award for contracts for Phase 3 of the 2019 capital construction order authorization, and it's to award to the low bidder meeting specifications. Contract number 18, which is mechanical work, to Jezreel Mechanical, and contract 19, electrical, D&D Industries Incorporated.
Can I have a motion to approve these construction bid awards? Gloria, second Kim. Any questions or comments?
I have to abstain from this one.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? Okay, passes 8-0 with 1 abstention.
Next is a resolution to declare certain items surplus and obsolete, and delegates the Assistant Superintendent for Business to dispose of said items in a manner consistent with Board of Education policy. And the list includes some items from our in-house print shop that is out of date now, given today's technology.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the declaration of surplus obsolete property? Judy, second Kelly. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, passes 9-0.
The next resolution is to designate May 18th, 2022 at 2 p.m. for the canvassing of affidavit ballots at the district administrative offices, and also that the following individuals be designated as the Central Board of Inspectors to cast and canvass the affidavit ballots. That would include myself, Linda Livingston, and Deborah Sim.
Can I have a motion to approve the resolution to canvass affidavit ballots? Blanca, second Rebecca. Did you have your hand up? Oh, sorry. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? It passes 9-0.
And finally, this evening, we have 2 donations. We have a monetary donation from Linwood PTA for the purchase of playground equipment, and we also have a donation from Joanne Ryan of a cello and 2 violas.
Can I have a motion to approve these donations? Barb, second Kelly. Any questions or comments? Just thank you to Linwood PTA and Joanne Ryan. Okay, all in favor? Passes 9-0. Okay, thank you, Neil. Next, we have board president action. I have one item. It's the appointment of election workers. We recommend the appointment of the following individuals to serve as election workers at the budget vote and elections on May 17th, 2022. And you'll see the list of individuals who will be working at the budget vote. Can I have a motion to approve the appointment of election workers? Blanca, second Nate. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Passes 9-0. Thank you. Next, we have board committee reports. We'll start with communications.
We haven't met since our last meeting. We have a scheduled meeting on May 31st at 4:30.
Thank you. And business practices?
We haven't met, and we don't have one scheduled.
Okay. And audit?
We have not met, however, we have a meeting on Monday. I'm just checking, I think it's
May 9th.
8 o'clock.
Yep.
May 9th.
Who am I missing? Policy.
We have a meeting coming up next week.
And DEI?
Yep, we talked about engaging the PTAs within our subcommittees, just going to find out what's going on there. They're going to be working on engagement within the community. Also, they talked about, the research committee talked about surveys for teachers, just about district and state provided resources, and have teachers maybe talk about what works, like if they have to use their own materials for specific topics. Also, if there's a specific topic that they would like to talk about or take on. We also talked about the equity audit, which was discussed earlier. Hold on, flipping the page. A lot of information at that meeting. We talked about, let's see, communications was scheduled to meet on May 12th. Diversity in action. There was a collaboration between GHS and Tech Valley, which was actually pretty cool because they help students of color have STEM connections. So they said, if you can see it, you can be it. So they had higher ed from Clarkson, Harvard, Microsoft, Google, TikTok. They had like a panel mentorship day. Sorry, Matt, that I keep looking at you just to. Also, the EF tour, which was amazing, and just the cultural knowledge, seeing the global citizenship. It was a great trip. Mr. P went on that trip. Westmere also, for the celebration of Ramadan, they had the text read with the authentic meaning, that's actually pretty cool. I like that part. Also, we talked about the membership and Marie sent out a ton of information looking for members. And then we talked about our learning component, just like meaning makers, whose perspective isn't heard or hiding in the background. And then we talked about a possible student-only committee just to make sure that they had a student-comfortable space.
Thank you, Kim. Next is public comment number 2. Linda, do we have any public comments?
No.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have board issues, ideas, and sharing. Does anyone have anything to share? Oh, go ahead, Blanca.
Just like something we should consider in the future. I had a parent reach out to me about the Washington Studies trip, saying that they would have really liked to have their child go, but they would have appreciated perhaps a little more time to gather the $500 deposit. So when they heard about Washington Studies and signed up for the interest meeting, they were expecting that they would have to have the money due a little later on, but the $500 deposit, there wasn't enough time to gather that. And since we talk about equity and stuff, I think that's kind of an easy fix, right? If we give them like a little more notice, like, yes, this is the interest meeting, but start saving ahead of time so that you're ready, because then by the time they raised enough money, all the spots were gone. That's all. I just want to bring that up and put that in maybe Mike's radar for next year.
Other board issues, ideas, and sharing? I just want to bring up, because Dr. Wiles mentioned it, and I know I mentioned it in the past, the idea of creating a capital project for the middle school and the parking lot and the traffic over there, that I feel like it's just, we can't always do it, so it's just kind of kicked down the road, but at some point, it's going to have to be dealt with, and I feel like it's just going to be worse. There's construction across the street from the middle school, so I feel like after this vote and election is over, looking at board goals, et cetera, I really think that that's something that we shouldn't really push down, and it's just been forever, and it's just getting worse and worse. And we have a building in the front of the middle school that is vacant, that used to be, I think, the district office like years ago. It's like a waste of space. So we have this like waste of space there and traffic. So it just doesn't make sense. But because you mentioned Dr. Well, I'm just going to keep bringing it up because it's not good.
I think, wasn't a plan done, like in a facilities committee a few years back? For some reason, I picture Mike just really excited over this plan. So
I don't know.
I looked into that a while back, I think.
There was,
Yeah.
Prior to the 2019 project,
Yeah.
one of the proposals was to reconfigure the parking lot at Farnsworth. I think it had about a $3 million price tag.
Sounds about right.
And the project was ultimately defeated, and that was taken out of the first round, so it wasn't there. But the old DO has been on our list to remove again and again and again and again. And someday that may happen, but it's not as simple as it should be. We need SED approval, and we've always had other priorities when money gets tight. So yes, it's on the list.
Any other board issues, ideas, and sharing? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Barb, second Nate. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 9-0. Thank you, everybody.
Building become a Starbucks.
Have a good night.